What's going on?
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding. From the words I spit, so sharp, so freezing, so cold. Behold, frostbite they feeling. I could tear you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste and my mind starts feeling. I don't pace myself, I grind on kneeling. Got lust for change, I just love the feeling. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. Cause I'ma live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I go by at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll soon be winning. I live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I go by at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll soon be winning. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon.
EV Mux, we're still learning. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Dead Air live on our Sunday night show. Thank you guys for joining us. Hope your weekend has been going fine and dandy. I hope the weather's been more in your favor than it's been down here in Florida. Heat index average by 10:30 in the morning is about 100 degrees. It's
My goodness.
insanely hot, and yet the rain seems to be eluding us for the moment, but I'm sure we'll get around to that also. But thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, the reminder bell for upcoming activity on our channel and the thumbs up for the content, which is very important for the algorithm. And thank you guys who are joining us also in the chat. My name is George Lopez. With me is Mr. Ken DeCosta out of the great state of Rhode Island, which is probably doing better with weather than ours is at this point. That be fair?
A little rainy tonight, but it's been warm up here. So, we're dealing with it. When we're doing this show in the middle of February, we'll think back to the good old days. So nice to have everybody in tonight in the chat room. We promise you an interesting and informative and fun show tonight. So I think we're going to have a blast with this.
Yeah, if you're talking about February for you guys, yes, you're probably going to look forward to this or look back on this in fondness. Meanwhile, in February, I'll probably be doing the show in my backyard
That's okay.
because it's much nicer then. Iconic personality who we have lost this weekend, the immortal, in parentheses, Hulk Hogan passed away. And I believe what they talked about was the surgery he was having done, neck surgery, and he had complications from that, wound up with cardiac arrest, brother. So I am sure it won't take long before an unnamed individual starts doing EVP sessions with him.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Not to be mentioned. Yes.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace. And lost Ozzy. Prince of Darkness is no longer with us this week. So I think that, Ozzy's the type of guy who spanned generations. He's one of those artists that in our time was coming up with Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi and crew, and a big part of our childhood growing up musically. And, span the generations where, even whatever it is, baby boomers, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, um, they all loved Ozzy. So he will be sorely missed as well.
Um, Quick bit of information for you guys. Uh, I'm still on my 12-year-old laptop, uh, but the new desktop arrives uh, projected for tomorrow. So we'll see what happens with that. And then I gotta set it up and load up everything and take it from there. But I promised you that if things didn't go to my satisfaction, that there would be some information, valuable information to you all. And here's what it comes down to, because uh, all of us out there, we all use computers. Maybe we don't all go down the Dell direction, but this has nothing to do really with Dell so much. But I need you all to be aware of the fact. This way, you don't have complications coming and joining us on the show or doing anything else that you're doing online. But be aware of this fact. Intel processors, generations 13 and 14, are malfunctioning worldwide.
Hmm.
I'm getting the new computer with the Ultra, Intel Ultra, which apparently does not have the same glitch that the standard Gen 13s, the i7s, and the i9s seem to possess. So there are a multitude of softwares. Talk to your teenager or talk to a friend or family member that's in that late teens, early 20s. Find out which is the best, but there are apps that you could add to your computer that could read the temperature of your processor on the computer. And if it's hitting above 150 degrees Celsius, you are on your way to a meltdown. Now, you may not do like Ken and I do with video editing, you may not do streaming, to which case you may possibly be safe. But still, for you to be aware of it, this is just my little tidbit of information for you guys to use down the way here, because it shouldn't be that way, and that's what my 7 months of nightmare have been like, trying to get this rectified. So thought I'd throw that out to you guys so you have that information. Do with it what you will. But
Yeah, sometimes I'm happy without knowing how the sausage is made, but but we'll keep that in mind for sure.
until you find a tooth in it, a rat tooth, and then you want to know how it's all made. But either way, we are still, as you saw, we're still trying to navigate EV Mux. It's a great system. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to have any of its own glitches, except the hosts who are still trying to learn all of this. But we'll get it down, my guys. We probably had a lot of those issues with StreamYard. I can't remember, Ken. It's been so long. But now going with EV Mux, we'll see what the future holds for us.
Future is in good hands. It truly is. Truly is. Everybody looks and sounds good. So we're glad we're in week 2 of this thing now, and it's awesome. And just you know, if we go dead, just hang in there for a little while. No, we won't. We'll be good. But as mentioned before, really looking forward to tonight. Everybody, for the most part, likes a good scary story, loves a good horror movie or TV show. But sometimes the stories behind them are freakier than what you may see on the silver screen. So, what we thought we'd do tonight is talk about a few of these. and kind of flesh it out a little bit, tell you a little bit about the movie itself, the people who are in the movie, and exactly what kind of mad geniuses were behind adapting these, writing a screenplay. We are all aware that Hollywood takes great liberties, but tonight we're going to talk about the social aspect of it, its effect on the paranormal field. There'll be some true crime in here as well. So we hope you'll stay with us and maybe learn a little something and chime in on your thoughts on these things. So we've got about 11 to 12, maybe a baker's dozen of these things prepared. And we also thought, who can we bring in tonight? And I was glad he reached out to me because um, if you follow him on Facebook, you'll know that he writes movie reviews on a lot of these things, movies that are coming out. Horror is one of his favorite genres, and you'll recognize him because he was just on with us last week. But he's actually the perfect individual to come on here and break these down because he's got to know what of these things. Horror, paranormal, movie, literature, the whole bag. So,
Well, hello there. It's like deja vu.
All over again. You know,
Ujade,
we were initially trying to get Steven Spielberg, but you're much better.
True. You know what? Steve's really busy these days. I call him every now and again just to see how he's doing, and he's pretty darn busy. So he asked me to step in.
Oh, give him our love.
oh, you're the
Didn't
best.
know when you move over to EV Mux here that you get me as a package deal. You're gonna have me on every week now.
Right. EV Mux, if you're listening out there, if you're looking to sponsor anything to do with the paranormal, call me. Call me. So, gentlemen, when you want to light up this screen and get this ball rolling, you just put down the
Hey
throw
Joseph.
the
Hey
flag,
Jason. Good
throw
to
the
see you guys.
green flag, and off
Mary
we
Beth.
go.
Good to see you.
Very bad.
So, as
And
Ken was saying earlier, I'm a huge horror movie buff, and every time I see a movie, I cannot help but spread my opinion all over the internet, which is sort of the nature of things today. But I try to break it down and be objective with most of these movies. But just about all of the movies I think we have in our lineup today, give or take maybe one or two, I have in fact seen, and I think I'm familiar with the background behind quite a few of them. So I'm looking forward to chit chatting about it and the impact that the movies had when they came out as well.
yeah, absolutely. So, without further ado, let's go get into, and the one I want to start with to this day, over 50 years ago, is still considered by many the most terrifying movie of all time. And of course, I am talking about The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty's tremendous, tremendous piece of work, 1973. And we'll get into that. But in terms of background of this, we know that there was a young man who went by the pseudonym of Roland Doe. Well, his name was actually Ronald Hunkler, and he's on the left there. Fun fact, he went on to be an engineer for NASA. And next to him on the right is Father Bowden, who was the attending priest for the exorcism that took place in a couple of locations, St. Louis, Maryland, and so forth. And of course, in the movie, Bowden was played by the great Max von Sydow, and of course, that is Linda Blair, 13-year-old Linda Blair as Reagan. So one of the other things I want to get into with this is an individual known as Captain Howdy. There he is. Okay. Now, Captain Howdy was a disciple of some sort of a demon named Pazuzu, who made his appearance a little bit later on in the movie. But Captain Howdy was interesting. It was one of these. during the movie, if you almost like subliminally, he flashed on the screen, made everybody go, "What was that?" I remember being a young lad at the time and literally seeing on the news and in person movie theaters being picketed by Christians and Catholics and people of the faith who thought that this was just blasphemy in its largest form. And of course, for a movie studio, you can't get that kind of publicity. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of The Exorcist, Christopher, and all of the movies that it spawned
Well, it
at the
absolutely
time of.
it spawned a genre without any question. I believe. I mean, I could be wrong on this, and I'm willing to be challenged on it. I believe it is the first exorcism film. Certainly the first of its kind, and it spawned an entire genre. And to this day, I think just last year we had a couple of different versions. There's a new film that's, I think, actually supposedly based on the true story that The Exorcism was based on. We've had sequels, we've had prequels, we've had so many films based on this, and it's interesting because while I do think that the public reaction to it, with people picketing the theaters, not letting their children walk down the same street that the theater was showing on, believing that they were going to get possessed by the devil if they sort of walked past the theater and things like that, which some people genuinely believed. I think that's, of course, obviously hysteria. But on the other hand, I do understand at least some of the controversy surrounding it, because some of the scenes in the film are truly horrific, and there's scenes that I think, I mean, I wouldn't even want to say out loud that there are moments in the film that I think that it's astounding that in the 1970s they committed this to film. A screener, at the studio reviewed it and said, "Yep, we're going to let it go out that way," because people were certainly a lot more conservative, socially conservative at that point. So I am shocked sometimes that the film got out in the cut that did, with some of that stuff still within the film.
Yeah, I think socially it turned everything on its head at that point. And of course, every studio after that being copycat industry, The Omen came, which actually The Omen wasn't bad in
And it's a
terms of
brilliant
that.
film. I
So
mean, The Omen is a genuinely scary film.
yeah, it was not bad. But there are certain tropes that followed, especially when things happen to children, right? Ask Stephen King about that. My
Yeah.
goodness gracious. But the one of the things I want to talk about, and George can jump in on here whenever the mood strikes him, was the idea of the Ouija board from a paranormal perspective. Up to that point, there were instances where people were communicating with the other side via Ouija board. One that comes to mind is the story of Patience Worth, um, where she was receiving messages and wrote books based on the woman she had contacted through the Ouija board. So that in and of itself wasn't unusual. But Ouija boards weren't, to that point, known to contact demons and malevolent entities and so forth. It it wasn't. It
No,
was a
absolutely.
harmless parlor game that found its way. Norman Rockwell painted pictures of a couple using a Ouija board, and suddenly it became a direct pipeline to Satan. And I think it rests firmly with this movie. And there were people who were not even born at this time that generationally have just carried that on.
In the biggest way. And I have to say that, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying this, but I cannot help but I really have to shake my head at the people who still are so freaked out by Ouija boards. And I say that only because, listen, it's mass produced by Parker Brothers. It's a pasteboard with something mass produced in a machine and a plastic planchette, and it has no power unto itself. The idea that it is that it can potentially allow you to open a conduit of some kind, sure, I get that. But people are like, I won't even have something like that in my house, bad juju, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, come on, listen, we have to be realistic about this. And I think people's hysteria level really goes through the roof when it comes to Ouija boards, because as you pointed out, for decades before The Exorcist ever hit theaters, this was a very popular Victorian sort of origin parlor game, and people played it all the time. You can see scenes in films dating back to the 1940s of people using Ouija boards. There's a great scene in I think 1941, 1942, they're around, a film called The Uninvited, if you're familiar with it, a wonderful haunted house movie from at least the mid 1940s.
One of the best.
Yeah, it's a brilliant film, wonderfully spooky, and they do the thing where they take little pieces of paper, they put it in a circle around the table, they use a wine glass and everything else, but it's still the same idea. It's the talking board, and nobody was offended by it at that point. So it took a really long time, I think, for that to build up to the horror show. But yeah, I think The Exorcist you can lay the blame of that squarely at the foot of The Exorcist, and to this day, the Ouija board is probably one of the most common tropes in horror. In fact,
Mhm.
in about a month, there's a brand new movie coming out called Witchboard, which is a remake of the, I think, early 1980s. But it's a
Yeah, it was in the 80s. I think it
yeah,
was I forget who was it. Was it Tony Katayan maybe? Or
yeah, it was definitely Tawny Katane. And there's actually a couple of notable actors in this new one as well. I mean, and but it's the idea that the Ouija board turns up time and time again in all these films, and it's become a trope of horror. But it really is almost entirely based on the film The Exorcist. So
yeah, I mean, to give you an idea of the power of movies, the power of the media, it's turned
you're frozen up on me, Ken. Sorry.
and believe
We got a little connection issue with Ken.
Looks like it.
where we were summoning, minions of Satan and all the rest of it. This movie, it incredible the influence it had on the paranormal field, the study of the paranormal in general, spiritually, psychologically. Um, I go back to 1973, the influence that this film had.
And it's interesting. You mentioned earlier the demon Pazuzu, who comes up in the film as a visual, but is never referenced that way in the original film. In fact, I don't think in any way he's referenced in the book either. I think they were in search of something creepy and historic looking.
Howdy.
And and I think actually now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Captain Howdy there is it the actor who plays the priest? Jason, gosh, what's his name? The actor.
Jason Miller.
Jason Miller. I think that might be Jason Miller in the makeup. I could be wrong about that, but I've always believed that was Jason Miller. But that moment where you see the sort of backlit, figure of Pazuzu, the sort of demon with the wings and everything else, I think they had just hunted down to find some kind of suitably creepy looking ancient statue in order to come up with that. But in the second film, which is dreadful, by the way, the second film is an absolute nightmare. They specifically now reference Pazuzu, and they bring up the idea that Pazuzu is this Babylonian or Assyrian plague demon, and sort of incorporate him. But I feel like that was an afterthought, and so as a result, Pazuzu has now become inextricably linked with the with the story of The Exorcist. But I believe that that's almost entirely an afterthought and has nothing to do with what William Peter Blatty originally wrote.
Right. Absolutely not. Okay. So, chime in there in chat. What do you think? I understand those of you who have claimed to have experience with Ouija boards. If you would like to somehow debate this in any way, send your emails to Chris Rondina. He'll be glad.
There he is.
There he is.
Yep.
There's the guy. There's Pazuzu.
And it looks like Joseph Frez was saying that the actress who played Captain Howdy was a woman named Eileen Dietz, who I'd not heard of before. But I've always, because of the look when that brief sort of flash, I always thought that was Jason Miller doing that. So thanks for updating me on that. I probably should have referenced that one or researched that one first, but did not know that. So good to know.
Yeah. Moving on now, we come to a franchise that began in 2013. Hint, hint, hint. And
Shocking.
since then, some of these movies have a certain common denominator. Of course, I am talking about The Conjuring. from the director of Saw and Insidious, The Conjuring, based on the true case files of the Warrens. And of course, in this spoiler alert, you are going to be seeing a few of these that had the Warrens connected to it. So, of course, this is these are the stars: Vera Familia and as old
Patrick Wilson.
Patrick,
Yeah.
and who both of them wonderful actors, by the way. If you haven't seen anything else they've ever done, and of course, they play the iconic Ed and Lorraine Warren. It is based on the experiences of the Perrin family. Here they are. Basically, I think that was taken at their home prior to moving to Harrisville in Cumberland, Rhode Island. And of course, this went on to spawn the Annabelle franchise, a franchise within a franchise, and showing you a little bit of the difference. This is Hollywood Annabelle and the real Annabelle, and one more shot of Vera kind of recreating that iconic photo of Lorraine. So, lots to chew on here.
Now, I love the original film. The original film is a wonderful haunted house movie. I think that everything from the choices of the wonderful music that they use in the film, fantastic performances across the board in there, and it's just such a great film. Obviously, we know very, very well how highly, highly fictionalized the film is.
Yes.
To say nothing of the fact that in the film, of course, Ed and Lorraine Warren are the absolute heroes of the day who succeed in banishing the evil from the house, and in real life, it was virtually the opposite. And Andrea will tell you this without hesitation that supposedly they came in, they raised a lot of ruckus, had them do the séance, everything went horribly awry, and then the haunting just got worse. So that's about as much of a Hollywood reversal as you get.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has, as is its wont, stirred a lot of controversy.
It has.
Without touching on the current situation, because that has been beaten to death, and there is nothing to report on the current situation. There's so much of it still in flux right now. Who knows? But to the point of the movie itself, highly successful franchise. I must admit to not seeing a single second of any subsequent movies or their spin-offs, The Nun, Annabelle, none of it.
The Annabelle
I watched.
franchise. The Annabelle franchise is interesting because here's one where the first film is god awful. It's not scary. It's not well written. It's dreadful. The sequel is actually fantastic. The sequel, called Annabelle Creation, is actually genuinely scary, has fantastic performances, and that's a real rarity where you have a dreadful movie and its sequel is a huge improvement. And then there was a third film in which of course, the first two Annabelle films do not have Ed and Lorraine Warren in them. They make a cameo, a little bit more of a cameo, sort of an extended appearance in the third film, which is also great fun. The third film is like a funhouse movie, but seriously, if you're in the mood for something good and spooky, Annabelle Creation or Annabelle Comes Home, both great fun and certainly worth your time. Not in any way based on reality, of course, but still good fun. And if you're looking for a great Halloween movie, Annabelle Comes Home, the third film, is actually like a Halloween funhouse, in film form. And that to me was a joy. So I got to see that one in the theater.
Yeah, the very first time I watched the movie in its entirety, ironically enough, was with Andrea Perrin at the Conjuring.
Oh wow.
I had seen bits and pieces, but I was kind of like, okay, well, we got to watch this. And, it was enjoyable enough. It really was. There's been a lot of controversy around it. People have certainly picked the story apart, especially, Andrea's writings, her trilogy.
Yeah.
So to put that out there, I think Andrea herself will certainly admit to leaning more toward anecdotal
Yeah.
tales, where she's interviewing people and speaking to people. And I'm sure if she had to do it all over again, she would probably, do more hard research. Not to say that she did not, But in terms of their own experience, that is told, that is their story. In terms of the background and the history, I think that that's been the low hanging fruit for a lot of historians and people who just want to poke away at this thing. So I think it's important to say that Andrea knows that.
Yeah. I think
You
one of
know,
the problems you often run into is things like this is that as we see in so much of the world today, everything seems to be separated into black and white. Everything seems to be separated into either, I completely believe it with all my heart, or it's a complete hoax, and there is no middle ground on this. But this is a story that I think that there is absolutely a middle ground. When you read Andrea's book, there is the book itself is largely a sort of a series of different anecdotes about the family with surprisingly little haunting information in it. That feels like it only comes up every few pages or so. But the reference that she makes to there was an older man, and I can't remember his name for the life of me, but
oh
an
yeah,
older man who ends up being the one who I think first sort of tells Carolyn Perrin about Bathsheba, this alleged
Mr.
you know and it makes me think that I doubt that this old gentleman came up with the story on his own. And so, in fact, is it possible that that there was some kind of a rumor running around her about her? Absolutely. That doesn't make Bathsheba in any way, guilty. In fact, it just makes her a woman who, unfortunately, sparked a rumor, whether it was because of something that really happened in her life or some situation, just like the Salem witch trials, honestly, the idea that it was very, very easy for a person to become a target of suspicion. So the folk tale about Bathsheba, I don't believe the folk tale about Bathsheba is fictional. I think the folk tale had really come to exist and lasted long enough that it ended up being communicated to Carolyn Perrin. Bathsheba herself being a witch or any of that other thing, obviously, that has been debunked soundly, and almost all the details of it appear to have been, well, not just completely fictional, but certainly highly elaborated, for the purposes of the film. The one thing about the whole Conjuring sort of universe that unfortunately I think has happened is it's really redug up the whole persecution of witches thing, and not in a way which is ironic or ever exonerates the witches. It really points a finger at witches
Right.
in a very Puritan way, which I don't really approve of. And that's probably, as it's not just in the original Conjuring film, but the Conjuring 3, it does that even worse. So
Right. The sad part is that if Bathsheba Sherman, who existed, she spent
pretty
any time, we did live there, spent any time at that particular farmhouse, it was very limited, if any. So, unfortunately, what happens is, in terms of getting the message along, the delivery system has changed, Christopher. And like,
right,
we are in the camp that there was no internet when we were young.
right,
I know, I know it's hard to believe, but through social media, how it's perpetuated this myth of Bathsheba. First of all, from a moral stand, this woman has been vilified. An actual woman who lived
yeah,
has been vilified, and still, to this day, people won't let it go. They
right,
won't let it go. I'll give you an example of this. Let me bring her back. Now, with the unfortunate passing of Dan Rivera, and again, our sincerest condolences to his family and friends. There were comments, for one, saying the doll on the right, when she was pictured in some of these stories, people were saying that's not even the real Annabelle. They truly believe the one on the left is the real Annabelle, which an idea of how this influences people. The movies. No, it is not the actual Annabelle. But that's all they know, and that's not going to stop anybody from commenting on it, and that's fine. You're welcome to have your opinion. But in this case, I have seen, and I don't know how you feel, Chris, but I am hard pressed, and I'm sure there's others, but to think of a movie that has so skewed public knowledge of something than The Conjuring. in terms of the characters and in terms of who they were portraying, the real people, the real articles, because The Conjuring, and I'll just end with this point, The Conjuring really put the idea of haunted objects squarely in pop culture.
Yeah.
Not that they didn't exist before, but this one just
It
blew
turned the
my
volume up. It definitely turned the volume up on that kind of thing. And it's
yeah.
unfortunate because one of the things that I deal with a great deal in my line of work is legend trippers. Legend trippers are people who learn about some alleged story. You know, every one of these movies at the opening, you know, in the opening scroll says, you know, based on a true story. And as soon as they see that, they're all in. They buy everything they see on screen. People who don't realize that these stories are, if not fictional entirely, are at least highly fictionalized. And so they tend to presume that everything will be like they saw it on screen. And you cannot put that genie back in the bottle. Once they've convinced themselves of these things, you cannot dissuade them from that. And of course, you know, the Sutcliffes, who were living in the, you know, living in the Arnold at the Arnold farm at the time, learned this firsthand. And unfortunately, you know, it ended up, you know, creating a number of problems for them. So that's the problem. And the thing is that I have nothing against legend tripping. Part of what I do is legend tripping. When I get in a car and go to a haunted location, when I get on a plane and go to some legendary spot, it's because of the legend. And not always specifically because of the history. And I think I talked about this a lot last week, that the legend is as valuable to us as people as the history is. But it's when you can't distinguish between the two that you start to run into problems, because that
Mm.
creates senses of entitlement with people. People think, you know, that you're not allowed to keep this from me. I can come onto private property, you know, and things like that. And that can be really destructive. So the problem with legend tripping is that it it seems to divest itself of responsibility for being just decent citizens. And people need to realize that fictional, non-fictional, legendary, or true, that you still have to respect people's privacy, you still have to respect private property, and not do things like, for instance, fabricate a ton of rumors that somebody who was injured or killed in a situation, that they're the latest victim of a curse. That's incredibly disrespectful to their family, incredibly disrespectful to them. And that seems to be, of course, what's happening right now with Dan Rivera and the Annabelle situation. And that is deeply a shame. Uh,
No, it's
yeah,
it's disturbing.
yeah,
It truly is. But in a lot of these instances, these locations and these stories, people start to feel like they belong to us. Like the Conjuring House,
right.
where it belongs to us. Everything belongs to us. We have a say in it. We don't. Now, you and I have both been there. George hasn't. I expect him to show up and give us a bunch of crap for this any second now. Um, it is an interesting place in terms of what it's provided for documentation and experiences, nothing of the breadth or form of anything that happened to the parents. That's their story. But the place is interesting, and it's provided us some interesting moments in the times that we've been there. And that's
Agreed.
just the truth. All right. So, um, if you guys want to throw this around in chat, George, if there's anything, if anybody wants to throw down with us, then you can put their comments up there. We'll be glad to answer them. Moving along, another iconic one. Of course, it's the Amityville Horror. You know that was going to be in there somewhere.
When you said you couldn't think of any story that you know was comparable to the Conjuring House, that was the first thing I thought of is Amityville.
Absolutely. And there, of course, you see the Lutzes, you see Ronald DeFeo, and the iconic windows that immediately signaled their brutal multi murder of his siblings and parents. And there are the Lutzes on the left, and of course, James Bro Kidder, who played them in the original. For our purposes, we're going to kind of stay with the original here right now because, again, this is a franchise that spawned a lot of it. Want to show you a little bit about the house, how it's changed, and we'll tell you exactly why. You see those half moon windows as though it's staring at you. And on the left, that's how it looks basically right now. So we'll come back to that. But in terms of the windows changing, basically one of the owners changed them to just discourage people from riding around because that was the benchmark.
Right.
When they got to Ocean Avenue, they're looking for the windows. So it got so out of hand with the looky loos, people like literally camping out on their front lawns or parking in front of the house, or in some cases, knocking on their doors, asking if they can come in and
Like
take
I
a tour of the
said,
place.
boundaries just don't
Yeah,
exist for some of these people, unfortunately. I think it's ironic that they went to the effort of changing the windows on this beautiful historic home, because that style of windows is incredibly common on Dutch colonials. So common that I would
yes,
imagine simply within Amityville alone there must be other houses that have that same format of windows in them. And by the way, I think it's kind of funny that the house that in the dual picture you just saw, the one with the square windows is of course the actual house in Amityville. The other one is in Toms River, New Jersey, which they built, or they I think they made some modifications to the house, but it was an existing house that they used when they made the film. And to talk about like the sort of legend trippers and the fact that there's this weird disconnect with them is people who learned that the house in Tom's River was used for the film would go to that house under the impression that that's where it really happened. And I was like, you've jumped some kind of crazy logical bridge there. So now, of course, the original film is, it's funny. I've rewatched it a few times over the last few years. I really wonder if it was just the nature, or it was the time, or what. But I can't find much of anything scary in that film. I feel like it's slow moving, very very dull, and has a couple of the funniest scenes I've ever seen in a horror film. There's a scene that a couple of my friends and I would frequently act out and imitate, where a nun comes to bless the house, and as she's driving away in I think her Volkswagen Bug, she gets out and she throws up on the side of the road with the most obnoxious vomit sound you've ever heard, and it's a moment that's unintentionally incredibly funny. So no shade to Josh Brolin or James Brolin and Margot Kidder, who are fine actors, but that's not a scary film at all.
no, I think it's in terms of, I don't know. Do you say that because of what we watch now? Has it not aged
Yeah,
well?
it may just be the nature of the time. Yeah, it may be that it seemed very shocking in its day.
Right.
In the sort of, well, when did that one come out? 1975, four, something like that. It was right around
Oh
that time.
Lord, pretty.
79. Okay, it was a few years after The Exorcist, but I think people were primed for that kind of thing at that point. And of course, there is the whole based on a true story thing, which I suppose can lend to making it seem a little bit more scary. I just feel like today it doesn't measure up. I don't feel like the film has aged well at all.
Right. No subsequent family who lived there ever reported anything paranormal or anything odd.
Correct.
A lot of people point to no one staying there very long, but they don't take into account the nuisance that people had to put up with. It's like, we don't need this crap.
Yeah.
It's like, we're out of here. The other thing is, if you look at this house, it's got a boathouse, it's on a lake. It is a stunning
Yeah.
piece of property.
You
It is.
don't get that for most of the films because the films just don't show you the scope of that. And it's a big piece of property. It's incredibly prime real estate. The Lutzes did get it for a song because of the brutal crimes that had happened there. What, a year or so, not quite a year earlier. But I think most ordinary mortals just couldn't afford that kind of property on the best of days.
Right. And from my personal perspective, having really dug into the case, even reading court testimony, because I'm a sick puppy. Sometimes when I'm in, I'm all in, and how the court case went, and I mean, there was a certain type of corruption involved in that too. But they got the right guy. I don't personally believe that there's a ghost story there. Now, that's just me who looks for, any kind of scent of anything paranormal, but looking at it, um, I never saw it. And I know that there are even people who are involved in it that will tell you different. And that's absolutely fine. I preface anytime I say something like that with saying, I'm only knowing what I've learned. I was not there. I didn't experience it. And of course, the Warrens were involved in this too. Probably their most high profile case, which always puzzled me why that wasn't a movie, but maybe somebody's got the rights to the name or, who knows how that goes. I just don't believe with everything we know about book deals and movie deals being made with lawyers and things like that. That
There's actually a very brief moment in the opening of the second Conjuring film that has them at the Amityville house. They actually it gets a cameo sort of opener, sort of a stinger opener in that one. I think the reason they probably chose not to do the Warrens, sort of versus Amityville, is because uh, the stigma of that franchise has gone so far downhill that virtually since the first film, which was of course a huge financial success, I don't know what the financial success was of the second and the third films. I know that it was a downward spiral after that, but now it's not. I'm sure it's not a licensing issue because anybody with $10 in their back pocket can get the Amityville license, and the number of cheap direct-to-video absolute garbage Amityville films has probably got to be up to maybe 20 or 30 by now, and it's hysterical. It's honestly almost hysterical. I think they just didn't want to go for such an obvious low-hanging fruit. And so they had the Enfield haunting from England. They had the Devil Made Me Do It case from Connecticut and everything else. And I feel like they had stuff that was unplumbed territory to work with, and that was more enticing rather than just treading treading the ground that had been tread so many times before. That would be my guess, anyway.
I think there was an Amity movie that was, based in space. Uh, you can look that up, by the way. I'm not lying. There was one that had something to do with being on another planet. But that's where that lands. And it's a sensational case, but the Enfield, Connecticut haunting too. Yeah, I mean, and well, we'll kind of leave that there with the Warren. That's an entire show at another time. The other thing from Amityville I wanted to show, I've maintained this for a while because it was brought to my attention. Now, this is AI cleaned up a little bit. Okay, this particular photo. This is the famous or infamous photo of what someone says is the one of these sons, maybe Michael. And the reason that the circle is there or the oval, whoever it is seems to be wearing something plaid. Now I don't know if that has anything to do with the banisters or whatever, but it seems to be wearing plaid. And this photo is being shown around. It was a guy named Campbell, I think, who took it, who never said it was anything paranormal, but just as a point of comparison, that is the reporter that first showed up, and of course, that's Lorraine Warren. If you look at that gentleman there, the young man, got his hair parted pretty much the same way, wearing a plaid shirt. So to contrast that a little bit, we'll take that off, put this back on, and then show you him. So just food for thought that there's a school of thought that may actually be one of the people who were attending there. We'll take one more before we go to break, and of course, this would be the infamous Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay, which is based on a man named Ed Gein.
Yeah.
There he is, Leatherface and Old Ed, who had this habit of dressing in other people's skin. And there was a movie done on him. I know there's another one coming up very shortly with Charlie Hunnam.
Oh, I love him.
Okay. But in 2000, there was a movie made about him with Steve Railsback, who's on the right here. Sharp-eyed viewers might recognize him as Dwayne Barry from The X-Files. But he did Ed Gein, and I suggest that you watch this one because Railsback's an interesting actor. He's quite a character. But Ed Gein, for all his horrific crimes, went on to be at least the basis or an inspiration for a few other movies.
Yeah.
One of them is Norman Bates because of Ed Gein's unnatural attachment to his mother. Another one was Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses. And finally, Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, I knew that was the case.
So Ed Gein is, to say he's a fascinating character, he's a grotesque character, but his crimes still reverberate to current day, inspiring a lot of people. And boom, another story about his crimes and his life coming out very, very, very soon.
So I have to admit this. Now, I have not actually seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and slasher films are not really my thing. It's actually rare that you'll get me to go to see a sort of a standard slasher film. So although I did know, of course, the story of Ed Gein, I never really knew a lot of details about that one. So I don't really have a lot of personal insight into this. Although I will say that our fascination as a culture with serial killers is often almost baffling to me, because what I understand is that I do understand our fascination with supernatural horror, because the question of what happens after death is, it's one of the great questions of life, whether there's anything out in outer space that's alive out there, the supernatural and things like that. These are the great mysteries of the universe. The fascination with people being brutally killed is something that I understand a lot less. And I think probably over the last couple of decades, one of the things that's really turned me off is that films like Psycho, the original film Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween and stuff like that, those are incredibly suspenseful films, and so they're scary, and I think that's what makes them effective. It's
Yeah.
when these films have crossed the line into torture porn, which has certainly become very common, especially when the Saw films started coming out, Hostel, all of these films that want to graphically show you as much as possible of human beings being tortured. They really lost my interest at that point. I'm not overly squeamish by any means, but I just lose my interest once it becomes about brutalizing people, and that, unfortunately, I feel like horror, and we've definitely started to move away from that a little bit, and films are getting a little bit more cerebral again. But I feel like for a long time that was such a focus of the horror industry, is just showing us the most graphic kills possible and giving us characters whose whole existence in the film was to become a victim.
Right. Well, I mean, the stakes are raised very high now. Is how many different ways can it be
Yeah.
can it be portrayed how a human being can lose their life? But that is the you know part and parcel of the Ed Gein story. And it's bad enough we're probably going to lose our rating for putting that up, but that's okay. We won't go into the gory details about his crimes, but let's squeeze one more here before we go to the break. And we're talking about The Haunting in Connecticut, which is a true story. Again, the Warrens are involved in this. That may or may not be coincidental because they're in a lot of high profile cases. And Ed was okay about bringing the press in on some of these, or being involved because they were high profile, or being requested to come in, they were high profile. But this made its way. This is in Southington, Connecticut, which is very close to the Rhode Island line, just past Westerly. So this was very well known at the time. Here are the families, the Hollywood family, in which Virginia Madsen played Carmen Snedeker, who is on the left in the front row, the woman there, and of course they're taking a picture with Ed and Lorraine. And to contrast, this is also Carmen Snedeker, known as Carmen Reed now, and on the right, Virginia Madsen. Did a wonderful job in this. Now, they had moved into a home, that former funeral home, and that arrow shows you where the old funeral entrance is. So this is another one of those true, movies based on a true story that, of course, there were liberties taken with because that's what Hollywood does.
Every time.
But another controversial story, in as much as there's inconsistencies in the stories that have been told over time. And as an author, as a legend hunter, as a folklorist, you could probably speak to that better than me in terms of how a legend grows or how it condenses or how it changes, how maybe memories change, people take away things, they add things. So that seems to be the big controversy surrounding this movie. So say more about that, Chris, as far as time goes on, what happens to stories?
Memory is a very complicated thing because memories, we can create memories if we repeat a story to ourselves often enough, and we do feed into one another's stories. And when we if I have an experience and you have an experience and there's some similarity between them and we start talking about them and we sort of end up syncing up our memories, even if it's because we adjust our memories to adapt to something else we've been told or something we've been led to believe, our memories can actually change to fit that. And so, unfortunately, I think what often happens in these haunted house stories is that whether it's because of public scrutiny, because of publicity, because of the involvement of other people. The Warrens are a great example. I mean, I'm probably going to piss people off by saying this, but I think that just about everywhere the Warrens went, the hauntings ended up going from something mild to something, earth shattering. There was always demonic presences and things like that, and there was never such thing as an ordinary haunting. There was always some kind of diabolical activity, and I think that did end up influencing the stories of the participants, the people who actually lived through it,
Mm.
and these things end up getting really out of hand, unfortunately. And it does, I think, negatively impact the industry in general, the paranormal paranormal field in general, because what we have is we have stopped being investigators and we've started becoming legend trippers with pre-printed t-shirts that claim that we're an investigation team, and that happens so frequently where we're going to the same haunted locations that are basically haunted tourist attractions over and over again and reinvestigating them and reinvestigating and reinvestigating them, and the stories, the legends surrounding these places just grow and grow and grow until people can't walk into these places and not have a haunted experience. If they come away without a haunted experience, they feel that they have failed somehow.
Mm.
So they're predisposed to have a haunted experience, and I think that changes everything. Again, it's um, I mean, it's like anything else. I think that we get pre-programmed to have these experiences, and as a result, it changes everything that happens when we walk into these places. So I don't know a lot of the details of the actual Snedeker family. Of course, I've seen The Haunting in Connecticut, which is a great film, very very fun, but it also adds this whole weird sort of cult aspect to it, and all the writing on the walls and things like that. None of which is part of the original story, and yet it ends up being rolled into the legend of the story, and people then can't separate the fiction from the fact anymore.
Yeah, I think blurring those lines, we go back to the Conjuring situation. We go, and I mean, I'm sure that there are cases the Warrens took on that would be considered mundane and benign, but of course, these are the ones people want to see.
Right.
And what happens in this particular case, the Snedeker family moved to Connecticut because they had a son who I believe was suffering from leukemia, and he was being treated in Connecticut. So, to be close to the hospital, they found a house here and rented it. So, that was their story. And then, paranormal events started happening. There was a takeover of the son. His personality, his character changes. But how many people care that much about it to go find out and read these stories, which are sensational enough?
Yeah.
But when you don't think that this doll is actually this doll because the movie tells you something different,
Right.
um, See, this is where I'm not going to say it all goes wrong, because go see whatever entertains you. It doesn't bother me. I know it doesn't bother
Right.
Christopher. It bothers none of it. You go and see whatever you want to see. But if you are going to talk about investigation, research, and things like that, then that's pretty much the end of it right there. If
Right.
you're going to stop at a movie, I think that you can miss some things as well.
Right. Yeah, I often compare it to the fact that people just seem to have lost the ability to sort of think critically about this kind of thing, and so they see a film, and then they end up looking for everything that they saw in the film, and they don't stop to say what was the true story. How can I get to the bottom of this? It obviously. You watch a film like The Conjuring is a great example of this, and I think it's pretty certain that Carolyn Parent did not spin upside down, float up to the ceiling, and then spew flies and all the other kind of things that these things happen in the movie. That's the stuff that is all Hollywood. But when you take it completely at face value, it sets up an expectation that creates monsters. Not just within the folklore of it, but it creates the monsters in the people who go looking for it as well. And I do think that this is destructive in the long run to our industry, not the films. Not that the films exist. I don't have any problem with that. And if I'm going to make a film based on a classic ghost story, I'm going to make it as scary as possible. And that might mean elaborating, and embellishing it and so on and so forth. But what the monsters we create are the people who don't bring the full, their full faculties to, to rationally look at this and say, listen, the version of the Amityville Horror that had Ryan Reynolds and I can't remember the girl's name in it, but it drastically changed the story. And again, that changed the legend altogether too, because now people are expecting the things that they saw in that film. And you've got the weird man doing experiments on Native Americans in the basement and things like that. All of these things that they brought into it. And now people expect that kind of thing. And I just feel like the general public could do better. I feel like we could do better and be smarter. And unfortunately, I feel like, and I don't want to get into anything heavier than we're looking to get into tonight, but I feel like that's a general issue with the public today, not just with horror films, but with current events and things like that, is that people don't stop and say, this is what I've seen on television, but how do I find out what actually happened?
Yeah, it's not necessarily low IQ, it's low information.
Yeah. Or cognitive dissonance, not being interested in having your beliefs challenged.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who make, these YouTube videos essentially are making mini horror movies.
Yeah.
And want desperately to have an experience to be part of the story.
Oh, yeah.
George, if you want to come back in, I think we're going to go take our break right now. And how are we doing so far, bud?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting back, and when you guys are hitting over these movies, all of them that I've seen, and it just sparks those memories of which ones, as Chris said, can be ludicrous just because of the storytelling, and others in there that will be forever entrenched in my brain as terrifying. So I'm loving the background history to it, things that I'm not even familiar with. So I'm enjoying the heck out of it. We've got more on the other side of the break here, more movies, more topics, and more facts from Chris and Ken. You guys stay with us. You're watching Dead Air Live on a Sunday night. We'll be back right after the break.
We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Now showing on Dead Air Full Spectrum YouTube channel.
New episodes of Extremely Strange coming soon.
Every alternate Thursday on our channel.
Every Thursday. Opposite. Well, that was weird.
In cemeteries across the world, some headstones hold more than just names and dates. They preserve cherished family recipes, etched in stone as a lasting tribute. These recipes are more than instructions for a dish. They are connections to loved ones, memories of shared meals, and a way to keep traditions alive. In this series, we'll be honoring these unique culinary legacies by bringing these recipes to life. With respect and gratitude, we'll cook the dishes exactly as they were meant to be enjoyed.
Welcome to my party, we're just getting started. A life is a dream or a nightmare scarring. Hand me a drink cause I think I'm going all in. Get me a shrink who can catch me when I'm falling. Cover up my scars, flip the handlebars. Crashing in my car, wake up in a bar. I'll be a superstar, just on my avatar. This world is so bizarre, empty out the reservoir. Yeah, I'm taking 6 shots, yeah, straight to the face. And I wanna get lost, I'm sick of this place. Don't know how to stop when I'm feeling this way. So I'm taking 6 shots till I'm feeling okay. I think I'm going crazy, don't think I'll get home safe. So I'm taking 6 shots, all straight to the face. I'm taking 6 shots, are you coming with me? I'm taking 6 shots, yeah, straight to the face. And I wanna get lost.
For only $3 a month, which you can't buy anything else for $3 a month, you get the same quality you will get on any cable channel out there for all the different things that are on our Patreon account. Make sure you guys do check it out. Patreon.com/Dead Air Paranormal. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Um, the seamlessness here on EV Mux is pretty impressive. And I'm paranoid as hell because on this laptop, you just have the little pad in the middle. I'm afraid of accidentally just tapping something and setting something off.
Don't cut the red wire.
So far, it's worked perfectly. So thrilled with that. A very special guest tonight, Christopher Rondina, returning to talk about horror movies and serial killer movies and the facts behind them. And Ken, I turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, moving right along here. The next thing I want to bring up, talk about, is a movie called Deliver Us from Evil. And this is based on the experiences of New York City policeman Ralph Saatchi. And he was played by Eric Bana. You remember him from the Hulk, the original Hulk. And that's Ralph next to him right there. This is a young Ralph Saatchi, and speaking with Ed Warren. And this is a TV show, a short-lived TV show called The Demon Files. And second from the left, you might recognize Sean Austin, who's been a guest here on Dead Air. Unfortunately, the show only lasted 3 episodes, and I believe that it was just a little bit too intense for viewers. So what had planned probably to be a 6 episode block turned into three, and it was canceled because it was a bit disturbing, not in a "ooh, I want to watch this" type of way, but for cable TV, I think it was a little bit too much, language wise and so forth. That's just my opinion, though. But this is based on the experiences of a New York City policeman. And I mean, that's going to evoke images of Javi, who was doing it from another different perspective. But I think that the appeal here, Chris, was probably a first responder, somebody who was trained to be objective, that had these kind of things happen in his life. He had sat in on exorcisms. The only thing I kind of wonder is why one person in his position would have multiple instances of this type of thing happen to them. And I'm not casting a jaundiced eye or anything toward it. It's just, how do you run across so many things? Or was this off duty? I'm not clear on that. I'll be the first to admit it.
You and I have had many conversations about the topics of demonic possession, and the things connected to it. And, I'm happy to cast a jaundiced eye, on the situation, to be perfectly honest with you. And I'm not saying anything about, about this policeman, I mean, he certainly might be entirely, on the up and up. But I think when we predispose ourselves to have these experiences, when we, sort of set ourselves up for them, we can psych ourselves up into, sort of experiencing real things in the way that our mind tells us to. And what happens is that maybe that happens once or twice. Word gets out. Suddenly, you're the person that people start to call, and all of a sudden, you're being pulled in on all these other new cases and things like that. So I don't know how many cases this gentleman investigated over time, but it does start to make you wonder. For instance, just how many possessions are happening in New York, because it does start to become a little bit difficult to swallow after a while. And I think one of the very first talks I ever gave at one of the Ocean State Paracons was called Ghost Hunting Like Sherlock in a Scooby-Doo World. And it was about the idea that if you go on paranormal investigations and you've had a paranormal experience on those, that's amazing, man. That's wonderful. If you've had multiples, that's extraordinary. If you're having a paranormal experience every single time you go on an investigation, you may need to step back and actually look at your sort of your discernment. You look at your sort of, standard for how you're measuring that. Because what I've always said is that because we have yet, in the scientific world, we have yet to prove the existence and actually document something that can be replicated consistently of any kind of paranormal, activity, whether it's a telekinetic ability, whether it's psychic ability, whether it's, the existence of ghosts, the existence of demons, aliens, or any of these things. We have not yet met the standard which is considered acceptable by the world of science. And so if we're getting evidence every single time,
Mm-hmm.
we may need to heighten our standard of what we consider to be evidence. And that, I think, is the issue, with a situation like this. So my immediate response is, I'm not saying that this man didn't experience something real, and I don't know enough about him to be able to even speak to that. But
Correct.
how many possessions are happening, within such a limited physical space, and over the course of how many years was he doing this? And in fact, if in fact all these things were possessions, does that lessen the sort of impact of what a demonic possession is? Because one of the things that I find often occurs to me is that we talk about demonic possession. We talk about these, incredibly evil creatures, which, depending on your religious perspective on these things, either come from hell, or maybe they're extra dimensional parasites, or whatever they are. We talk about them all the time, but their lasting impact seems really tiny, really, really tiny. And
Mm-hmm.
we're treating them as if they're essentially mosquitoes. Anybody with a Bible or a pre-prepared sheet of sort of prayers or something like that can walk in, can challenge these beings. I mean, look at Zach Bagans there walks in, and he's basically like, I'm going to rip off my shirt and I'm going to fight a ghost tonight. It starts to be a little bit difficult to swallow, and difficult to give credit to, because we build these things up. Every possession movie, things are being thrown across the rooms and people are in danger of death, and yet all these possessions be happening in the real world, their impact seems to be pretty darn slight. And that either means that demons aren't nearly as powerful as we like to pretend they are, or maybe we're not actually experiencing demons.
Right. Well, why is it you think we still talk about the Roland Doe case? We talked about it before the Exorcist, which happened in 1950 or
Mm-hmm.
1949. Why are we still talking about that? Because of the rareness of these type of things. And from my perspective, spending an awful lot of time and an awful lot of years doing this and looking into these things, I do not believe, to my knowledge, I've ever had an encounter like that. And it would seem the law of averages would be on my side,
Yeah.
but I never have. And yet other people have 3 a month.
Yeah.
And I'm not casting an aspersion because maybe that's what they're called in to do. Now, I can't speak to whether they're predisposed or not to always look in that direction, but it can be a very volatile and dangerous to empower that type of thinking in somebody
Agreed.
without taking into consideration their, mental capacities, perhaps an illness. This is why the church has physical and psychological evaluations, because they're not dumb. They're
Right.
not going to go in there. They've got enough trouble, if you catch my drift. They don't need any more lawsuits like that. But as an author, as a man of letters, maybe you'll understand this. I am agnostic when it comes to demons, demonic possession, and all the rest of that, which agnostic means I don't believe or disbelieve. I just think a lot of times they're great stories that started with the Egyptians, and then there's Norse mythology, and then eventually it comes to the Middle East, it comes to Christianity, and it seems like they're sharing the same stories. Like, that's a really good story.
Yeah.
The Norse invented things like hell, which is a woman, by the way. Um, but suddenly these stories get sort of, if I'm using the right language, but they get appropriated
Yeah.
and kind of bent to, in Norse mythology, the idea of hell is a cold place because you are in, where you are. Then you get to the Middle East, and their idea of hell is a hot place,
Right.
you know.
I think the
So,
Bible is the first place that mentions a lake of fire, and that caught on. The idea caught on.
right, Hades, hell, all of these names of things are based on an older mythology that seems to have been passed on, appropriated, however you want to term it, by other religions, by other sects,
It gets
so
passed down. It gets passed down. It gets changed. The language changes. The word demon itself is actually adapted from a much older word, and it literally just means spirit. There's nothing intrinsically sinister or diabolical about the word demon. The daemon, or basically, was a spirit, and what we think of when we think of demons in the sort of the horror movie sense of it, that's a comparatively new invention. It's an invention that is, at least it is post Judeo-Christian belief. So that's not an old world belief at all. Evil spirits always existed in some form. There were good spirits, there were evil spirits, but there were evil daemon, there were good daemon, and so that just ended up becoming a catch-all word for these sort of evil spirits. But even within sort of modern paranormal context, we frequently refer to demons, and we use this Judeo-Christian worldview, and that we've got the demons and we've got the angels and things like that. Those aren't separate creatures. From a biblical standpoint, those are the same beings. These are, these sort of, almost mindless automatons, created as soldiers in a sense by God. A certain number of them end up rebelling, being cast out of heaven, but those would be the demons. And so essentially, these are the same beings. I don't particularly, I'm like you, I'm an agnostic. I do not have a specific religious worldview. I consider myself to be pagan, but that's less religious and more of a spiritual thing. Agnostic literally means I don't know. I don't claim to have the answers to all of these things, but I do not, even though I was raised as a Catholic, and I've got that whole sort of basis of seeing the world in a certain way. And if I stub my toe, I'm going to say Jesus Christ, just like everybody else does. But this isn't religious. This is just, that's just instinct. My default setting is to see the world based on heaven and hell and see this sort of angels and demons dichotomy, but it's not an actual belief system that I hold. And I feel like we get so caught up in that again within the paranormal field that people still default to that idea of being the way the universe works. It's not a very scientific perspective. And I feel like paranormal research should lean more into the science and stay at least an arm's length away from a purely religious or spiritual perspective on things. It's not supposed to be a theological pursuit unless you are a priest. And in that case, I know we've got priests that are in the paranormal field. Certainly we've had plenty of encounters with these folks ourselves. But I don't think that that's the right direction to go in for the paranormal field.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm of the mind, and I can make a case, and I won't do it tonight, that in some regards, paranormal is a form of religion in these days because it sure checks off a lot of boxes in terms of followers, in terms of leaders, and dogma, and you know, ideals and things of that nature. But it's also part of the desensitization that we have in that we look to, when I say we, I mean, I'm painting with too wide a brush, but some look at, the spirit world as being a prop for, videos or attention or things like that. So, I mean, demons are the same way. You have a ghost, oh, for sure, big deal. Aha, I have a demon,
Yeah, demons are sexier. That's the bottom line.
Well,
It's more exciting. It's more dramatic, and it's going to get the clicks. It's going to get the views. It's going to get people to tune into your show, and that's a really big incentive. Because let's be honest, as much as we would like to claim that a lot of these paranormal celebrities are completely morally upright and upstanding people, plenty of them are just in it for the bucks. And we're not going to name names, but I think we all have a pretty good sense of who some of those people are.
pretty much. I don't know what it is about possession that resonates so deeply in our emotions, but my next movie is called The Exorcism of Emily Rose. And this is based on the story of a young girl named Annalise Michelle. And there are two states. Number one, you have this absolutely beautiful young woman, and this is what she denigrated to. This is her with her family, and that's her circled. Very, very handsome, very beautiful family. In the movie, she was portrayed by an actress named Jennifer Carpenter, who is one of those actresses, Chris, that, those, it's like I know her from, or I know him from someplace else. That was what struck me. And one of our great actresses, Laura Linney,
Yes.
played the counselor. I don't think Laura Linney is underrated, but she is just, I don't know if she's ever, played a bad role. But here is the deal where this all goes bad. In as much, and this is not a unique story, this girl is obviously suffering from schizophrenia. Her family, on the other hand, believes that she's possessed. So they go on to do things like isolate her, starve her. I think there might have been some physical abuse there. They get a couple of priests from the church, and eventually, sadly, she passes away. And charges are brought that were, I think, ultimately dismissed against the church and her family. But this is kind of an offshoot of that, based on somebody here in America and what would happen in that type of a trial. So, Laura Linney playing her attorney, of course, um, and the treatment, which really is a case of beliefs overshadowing any type of reason that you might have. And this is why this idea of the demonic and why it's such a powerful emotion, to the point where, not intentionally, but they ended up killing their child.
Yeah.
So just get your feeling on that.
I think my biggest sort of takeaway from this is that, first of all, I am a absolute believer in freedom of religion. I'm an absolute believer in people's right to believe, whatever they want. But the rights of anyone to believe in a certain spiritual sort of system or path or God or faith has to end when it starts directly impacting the life of another person. And when you are putting somebody in physical harm, when you are endangering somebody's life, when you are stopping a person from getting care or stopping a person from just leading their life the way that they choose to, I don't think religion should have any power. And unfortunately, we have created a world where we have tried to create this separation of church and state, but in doing so, we've also made the church a monolith, and we've given it so much power as though somehow the church should not be accountable. And when I say the church, I'm not specifically referring to any one Christian church or, in fact, Christianity in general. I'm saying sort of the perspective on religion here in the United States. I know it's not the same in every culture, but we have to stop treating religious institutions as if they are above reproach. And the thing is that when we hit a point where we are now oppressing people or taking away people's ability to have medical treatment or to leave a religious situation, when a parent say, "I'm going to refuse treatment for my child because my beliefs say that that God will heal them," there has to be some kind of a limit to that. Again, I do believe in freedom of religion, and it's a very, very slippery slope to start talking about. But when a child starves to death or is neglected or is beaten or is locked in a room because they somehow broke some kind of a spiritual law, I don't think that we should live in a society where we allow that to happen. So we've got to put some kind of cap, a ceiling on what religious freedom actually means.
Well, the end result on this, it raises questions about faith, mental health, religious accountability, because again, this is based on a true story. And this wasn't one, I mean, there were movies I passed over because, I don't want to talk about Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and things like that. I'm talking about things that are documented, and this is one of them. Now, Annalise suffered from epilepsy and psychosis, and the priest and her parents were convicted of negligent homicide in this case. But those charges eventually went away. It amounted to a slap on the wrist for them for this. And there is a quite disturbing tape out there of Annalise Michel in the throes of this. I'm doing the air quotes possession, um, where she's speaking in a different voice. And I mean, it's terrifying. It really is. However, um, this particular case is quite disturbing, and the sad part of it about it is it's not unique, because I've looked into other cases of this type of thing
Yeah.
where families have interceded in something like this, jumped to that conclusion to horrific and tragic results.
I think that everyone should get to have the last word on their own treatment. In a case like, Annalise here, she may have been beyond the ability to give consent or deny consent for, for what was happening to her. I have to imagine that that's true. But I think that at minimum, that nobody, not even a parent or a guardian, should be able to deny somebody basic basic life-saving treatments, food or anything else, regardless of what their religious beliefs are. I think that we again, that is a line that has to be drawn, because your faith, no matter what it is, should never allow you to actively harm another person, not even your own child.
I'm afraid to see more of this.
Yeah.
You may not see it right away, but 10 years from now, somebody may, in 2025, this happened. I want to move along to the next movie, and it's called The Entity. And this is the story of a woman named Doris Bither who lived in Culver City, California. I've been to Culver City, where all the studios are. This is the actual home in which she lived. She was portrayed very well by Barbara Hershey, another one of the great actresses of the 70s. There is Barbara on the left, and this is Doris sitting on her bed on the right. Now, this is a very famous photograph that was taken during the investigations, in which an arc appeared over her head, and it said that these things morphed into an actual being. Now, on this case were a noted parapsychologist, Kerry Gaynor on the left, Barry Taft on the right. They became quite famous. They were parapsychologists at UCLA, and they handled quite a few cases. And this is a still shot from the movie with very similar things, that those light arcs and things like that. Now, what I guess is unique about this was one of the first cases. One of Doris's claims is that she was being sexually assaulted
Yeah.
by an unseen being. And this eventually led to more more claims of that. Now, whether they were copycat claims or whether it was less taboo to come forward after her case, it's not up for me to say. But it raised a lot of question, um, as far as a film that depicted a haunting mixed with sexual violence, and that inspired a lot of paranormal studies to come. Skeptics, to no one's surprise, had an absolute field day with this, with her mental state and her past, which included, some drug use, alcohol abuse, things like that. They had an absolute ball with it. But this is one of the first to explore the idea of the incubus and the succubus with a case that they were able to put on film.
So I haven't seen the film in a really long time, but this is a very old trope. Obviously, the idea of being sexually assaulted by a demon or a spirit or something like that literally goes back thousands of years. I mean, you have, of course, the incubus and the succubus, which I think go back to, again, sort of Babylonian, Assyrian, mythology. So go back literally thousands of years. As I said before, the idea of the demon and the way we think of it today, didn't really exist at that time, but there were absolutely evil spirits. And so it is fascinating, the idea that there are a lot of things about this case that remind me of the hysterical girls in Salem. The idea that they claim to be being assaulted, they claim to be being pinched or to being slapped, held down on beds and things like that. And while the girls in Salem did not specifically reference being sexually assaulted, I would think that that was because that was a social taboo that they would never have said. And I think that that alone may have been the only thing that really stopped that from becoming part of the conversation. But it's also the idea of uh, this hysterical women trope that is something that has
Yeah.
been part of patriarchal society for such a long time, that when a woman experiences something like that, we refer to them as hysterical and suggest that somehow that it's a weakness of the mind that allows this to happen, which is why these films are almost always about women. It's that it's a basically it's a very very old misogynist trope that hasn't died out yet. Is that women are somehow more susceptible to this kind of thing? That they are more susceptible to those influences, more susceptible because their minds are weaker. Again, this being a trope, not being what I'm suggesting at all, but rather why the story does not seem to die out. I don't really know a lot about the true story of this woman. I have seen the entity. I haven't seen it in many, many years. But at the time I saw the film, the internet did not exist yet, so I didn't even go in and like dive into her story and find out more about it. But yeah, I would say that I feel like this is just a survival of the hysterical woman trope and the sexual assault trope that was so common at that time, when a woman's either, whether it was her mental health or her even her nascent sexuality, was always in question and frequently being condemned by the people around her.
Yeah. I think that a lot of these movies based on, I don't know if you could make some of these movies today. I think that's fair to say, or you certainly would have to go about it in a different way, which would probably leave out. I mean, let's face it. We said at the top of the show that one has to understand what Hollywood does to these movies,
Yeah.
and the reason they do it, not necessarily because of you and me, but metaphorically because of you and me. This is what we want to see. They know what the demographic, they know what the audience is, and they understand that. And this is what people want to see, which doesn't make Doris Bither's story less relevant for what it is. But, again, the portrayal, because there's a certain, yeah, how can I put it? Sexually assaulted by a spirit. We got to make sure we get those very graphically on camera, and those type of things. Moving on. This is a sleeper, but I really enjoyed this movie, and it's called The Serpent and the Rainbow.
Fantastic film.
Um, and it is based on Harvard ethnobiologist Wade Davis's book, where he traveled down to Haiti specifically to look into the case of Clarius Narcisse. Now, this is Wade Davis on the left, Bill Pullman, another underrated actor. Good, and boy, that's great casting. They sort of Wade in his younger days, they sort of look alike. So, he goes down there and he sits there and experiences some rituals. This is the great Zeke Mokai. Another one of those, where else do I know him from actors?
Well, I
But
tell you, he manages to be a scary, scary presence in that film too.
you're damn right he was. But so now Clarius Narcisse, for those who might not be, I'll give you the dummies version of it because that's all I can do. Actually did an extremely strange on this case. It was someone, a Haitian, who died and was buried by his sister. Went to the funeral, the whole 9 yards, and then in a matter of a few months later, he was walking into town, and he was the victim of a toxin that, for all intents and purposes, zombifies people.
Yeah.
And they would do this to essentially make slaves of them to work on farms and things like that. And only by virtue of someone dying who had control over him and someone else just essentially forgetting about him to keep giving him this toxin, he was able to walk off under his own power and get back home. And when Dr. Davis went down and investigated what was going on down there, and of course, the movie is a lot more, occult, supernatural, type of thing. but it was more an academic study. But the movie itself, I loved it, Chris. I really did.
I did too, and I saw it when it came out in the theaters. I was very excited about it, and if I remember correctly, and I correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't seen it again in many, many years, but I believe that the supernatural elements of the film are left to the viewer to decide, and I think a lot of it is hallucinatory, so that they kind
Yeah.
of, and I think they leave with the idea that most of this was either in the drug-induced dreams and things like that, which I like. I like the fact that they address that because that's actually a big part of the story. So the toxin, again, I'm trying to remember if I've got this right. I believe it's a pufferfish toxin
I
called
think I think it comes
uh,
from the puffer fish.
tetrodotoxin,
Yeah.
which is it's a nerve toxin, but also and simulates death.
Hmm.
And that because the belief system, the sort of Voodoo belief system amongst these people is so strong and so ingrained in them that when one of these people is given the tetrodotoxin, dies, they believe that they have died, and when they are sort of resurrected by the Hungan or the priest that does this, and the priest says, you're
Right.
my zombie now, and I have your soul. Their belief is so strong that they actually are now sort of psychologically enslaved to that person, and it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I believe that we actually did an episode of Monday Night Monsters about this, where we talked about sort of the origin of the zombie myth, and that it actually does come from these sort of Caribbean zombie sort of figures, and that the much later sort of George Romero style of zombie is entirely a creation of fiction. It's entirely a creation of the horror film.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that it actually
Sure.
does come from sort of these Voodoo and Santerian beliefs, and so it was a fascinating film, and I love it because I really feel like it keys into the idea of that place where myth and reality intersect, and how often a legend can actually have a really strong and very, very real basis in actual historic events.
Yeah, I think what happens when this toxin is given, and it has to be given in a very precise dosage, or it can kill you.
Yeah, it
So
stops the
these,
heart
these
effectively.
right. So it makes you very susceptible to suggestion, and as they keep giving it to you, you become more susceptible to an even more powerful suggestion, and on and on and on this goes. So these slaves can literally be traded or sold as long as this chemical, which is for all intents and purposes what it is, keeps getting applied. So we got two more I want to talk about here, and one of them is A Nightmare on Elm Street. We were going to get to Freddy Krueger. This is the brainchild of the depraved Wes Craven. There he is. And of course, Robert England, who was a trained actor. I mean, I'm not. I don't know if he was a Shakespearean actor, but he grew up on the stage, and he found his way into this movie. So, what is it about Freddy Krueger that makes this compelling?
Well, the first
Wes
film, among other things,
Craven.
the
Wes
first film
Craven.
is actually terrifying. The first film is a brilliant horror film and is a real horror film. And there's nothing funny or quippy about Freddy Krueger in the original film. And it's dark, and it is violent and incredibly effective. And I think a lot of us that went to the theater back in, what was that, 84, 85, it was right around that time, to see this film. I think a lot of us went in there just expecting it to be yet another schlock horror film, and it's outstanding. It's a truly excellent film, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, of course, the successive films got quippy, and they got jokey, and they got more and more cheesy. But that first film
Right.
is so good, and it's so dark. Of course, you've got Robert Englund, doing a brilliant job as Freddy Krueger. Heather Langenkamp, but I think that was maybe her first film.
There's Johnny Depp on screen.
Yeah, a very, very young Johnny Depp, although that's not Johnny in this shot, but yeah, a very young Johnny Depp in one of his earliest roles in here. You've got John Saxon in
Yeah.
a lead role in here. So it's kind of a who's who of actors from that era. But you also have the idea of the sort of the child murderer, which is something that very psychologically sort of poignant and really affects people. And I thought the whole story in this original one about, the child murderer who is, killed in vigilante justice by the parents, and then begins to come back in the dreams of the children of the people who killed him. It's brilliant horror storytelling. It really is.
Yeah.
And now, see, I don't know much about any basis for this, which I think when you talked about it earlier was the first I'd ever heard that there was something that it was inspired by.
Oh, yeah. So Wes Craven found out, or was inspired by, a series of mysterious deaths in the 1970s and 80s, and they happened among Southeast Asian refugees, especially from the Hmong community. So there was a bunch of healthy young men who reportedly died in their sleep with no explanation, but they often described having terrifying nightmares and trying to avoid sleep. So the condition, let me see, was later given a name: sudden unexpected nocturnal death syndrome, or SUNS.
Hmm.
So when Wes Craven read about this, he said, "What would happen if your nightmares could kill you?" And as another fun fact, the name Freddy Krueger came from somebody who bullied him as a child.
That's great, actually.
So I don't know.
What a perfect revenge.
I don't know if he took revenge or made the guy famous. I guess it could work either way. But I've heard some, Freddy was based on this or that. No, it was actually Craven reading about this and having this germ of an idea. What would happen if your nightmares could is that what's happening to these poor young men? Because I had something else in here. 22 men, or 22 people died. 18 of them were men, all reported having terrifying nightmares. And I don't know where it went from there. I didn't have the time to really follow that timeline, if this is something that still exists.
Can I tell you a great horror movie anecdote here connected to this? So,
Sure.
this, again, I think the film was 1984, 1985. It's right around that time. But Halloween, of course, came out in I think 1978 and was a huge success. And then Halloween 2 was made, and still quite successful. Made a couple of years later, and they wanted desperately to make a Halloween 3 because the first two films have been so successful. And John Carpenter, said, "Listen, I don't want to do it anymore. I've already done it. Michael Myers is dead. End of story." So, I mean, seemed like he was dead and not coming back after the end of the second film. So they hired somebody else. They pitched the idea, and this writer pitched an idea, and he said, "What if Michael from the grave comes back, and he is actually now haunting the dreams of the people of Haddonfield, and is somehow killing them, in their dreams?" And basically pitched the idea of making it into an anthology series. And I don't remember the name of the studio that did the Halloween films, but said, "Listen, that's stupid. It's cerebral. People are looking for a guy with a knife, and that's what they want to see." So they said, "Listen, we're tossing your script, and we're going to get another one." And they ended up creating Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, which was an absolute flop in the theaters. Didn't have Michael Myers in it. Had a story that nobody got into. It's actually not a bad film, and it stands up much better, years later. But it was a flop. It tanked at the theaters. That same year, The Nightmare on Elm Street came out and came up with virtually the same storyline, and it was the biggest horror film of, again, 1984 or 5, whichever one of those years are.
Right.
But that film was the unexpected hit that spawned a brand new franchise. So how's that for irony for you?
Another little fun fact, Freddy Krueger's look was based on a homeless man wearing a striped sweater and a fedora.
Oh, geez.
Who was hanging out outside of the Craven house when he was a child, and often would stare in the window at him.
That's
and
certainly
just would
creepy.
terrify little Wes Craven. So he gave him that look.
Well, he owes that homeless man a lot.
Yeah, hey, I want to get into our last one here, and this is Candyman, of which another remake is coming. And again, Virginia Madsen, starred in this as well as the late Tony Todd. I believe Tony Todd just passed away very
Yeah,
recently.
it was only maybe a year or two at the most ago. Yeah, very recently.
Yeah, yeah. So this is one of those that goes back to, oh my God, I think it was a Serbian type of story, and then they adapted it and brought it to America and put it in Chicago. So the idea of this, you say his name three times, he appears, the old Bloody Mary trope. But the idea of him coming through a mirror and basing this in Chicago had some roots in reality. Because, George, if you want to, I'm about to just show a couple of pictures here. So if we can just kind of pause that, maybe, or maybe we can't. Okay, so this is Ruthie Mae McCoy. And she lived in Chicago and was complaining about somebody or something coming through her bathroom mirror. And eventually she was murdered because that's how these people gained access to her apartment, through a hole that they made in the bathroom mirror.
Everybody
And
probably just assumed she was nuts too.
yep, there's Tony Todd right there, the Candyman, and little illustration of that came in through the bathroom window, right? But that's what that is actually what that whole part of it is based on. I love Virginia Madsen. She's great.
I got to work with her very briefly.
Oh, come on, tell us a
Yep.
story. Say more. Say more.
I was an extra in a film called Mr. North. It was made in Newport back in the early 1980s, based on
Oh,
the book Theophilus North by Thornton Wilder. And so I get to be in the big final sort of ballroom scene where she is the bride, and it's her sort of engagement party there. And so it was Virginia Madsen, Anthony Edwards, another great actor, Robert Mitchum actually was in the film. Dreadful man. And it was actually directed by Danny Houston, the son of John Huston, great actor. And so Angelica Houston was in the film as well. So I actually got to spend about 3 evenings with all of them. And everyone but Robert Mitchum, delightful. Robert Mitchum, total jerk. So. But I know, so it's not like I had great personal connection with him. I didn't go out for dinner with her or anything like that. But I got to chit chat with her and a couple of the other actors for a good chunk of the evening, so that was nice. No,
well,
she spent a lot of time that I love.
My Mr. North story is the company I worked for at the time got the contract to sandblast, prime, and paint all the wrought iron at Salve Regina College and all along the 12-mile drive.
Oh, my.
So 2 movies could be filmed there. One was True Lies, and the other was Mr. North.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And as a result of that, we did such a good job that we were hired by Doris Duke to go and do hers.
There you go.
She is a character. She is a character. Oh yeah, we went in the backyard. We saw the llamas and
never got to meet her.
Oh my goodness gracious! So anyway, that's our brush with Hollywood, Chris.
There you go.
So that kind of comes to a conclusion on this, and there are other things that you certainly could go into. American Horror Story is one of them. And I don't really have any graphics on this, but they did an awful lot of shows that were based on Kathy Bates played what essentially was Delphina LaLaurie from the LaLaurie Mansion, which
and
has somebody...
Marie Laveau was in that same
Marie Laveau. Yeah. So a lot of these are based on historical characters and things like that. So Ryan Murphy did his due diligence on a lot of these things as well. Hotel and Asylum. There are stories.
The one that was about the Roanoke colony as well.
Roanoke. So there's a lot of research. And the X-Files. It always comes back to the X-Files, but not so much. But that was sort of a conglomeration of a lot of things. Betty and Barney Hill, alien abduction. No, one case or anything like that. But There's
A lot of real folklore in there, though, which I always appreciated. Yeah, a lot of times when they tackled sort of the traditional monsters, they did a shapeshifter episode that was based in Native American mythology, which I really enjoyed. They did a vampire episode, which pulled out some of the most obscure vampire mythology ever, like the counting of the seed, things like that, which I thought was absolutely hysterical, and I loved every moment of it.
the name of the episode was Three, the
Yes.
number three.
Yep.
And Scully, because Gillian Anderson was having her baby, she was kidnapped by Dwayne Barry, Steve Railsback, who was Ed Gein. It's like the 7 degrees of.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway, so he's on his own. He's out in L.A. That was one of the biggest panned episodes
Which
of
is
the X-Files ever. I loved it.
Yep, I thought it was delightful.
Loved everything about that.
And actually, I know Steve Railsback more from 2 other sort of obscure vampire-adjacent films. One would be Life Force, great, completely bonkers sci-fi film from the 80s, and The Keep, another bonkers sci-fi 80s film with a great score by Tangerine Dream and a very young Ian McKellen in it, both of which were sort of based on vampiric ideas, but he was a main character in both of those. So
the other one that comes to mind immediately, based on a true story, was Santa Claus versus the Martians.
Of
But
course.
that is on my wife's side of the family.
Yeah.
Basically, what happens there around Christmas time. So that kind of wraps it up for us. George, what do we got here? Man, 275 comments tonight, guys. You're really engaged.
I want everyone to kind of step back and take an understanding. This was similar to a 2-hour Extremely Strange, and Ken masterfully will whittle something like this down to 20 minutes. It's amazing because there's so much information involved there. So, yeah, quite entertaining to say the least. And yeah, people were definitely engaged in the chat with regards to these movies and the history behind them too. So bravo to both of you gentlemen.
it was good fun as always.
It's fun.
Yeah. And next week, special guest Chris Rondina.
Is he coming back again?
Like I say, I've actually just AI generated. I'm part of EV Mux.
Yeah.
You got me as a package deal.
He's our he's our returning Matt Damon. We'll get him back again.
Robo guest.
Or Don Rickles, depending upon which area you're from. No, next week from TikTok, a young lady by the name of Christina, which is going to be mind-blowing. And then, of course, we have very, very soon coming up, Michelle Belanger is returning to our show. And yeah, we're starting to roll into it again, guys. So make sure that you, again, click on that reminder bell. Definitely hit the thumbs up for us, too, because we greatly appreciate that. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. We hope you have a great rest of your week. Town Hall tomorrow night, 8 p.m. We'll see our Town Hall Patreon members at that point in time. Still got time to join us, guys. Again, that's patreon.com/Dead Air Paranormal. Join us, $3 a month, and you can get on screen with us. And now with EV Mux, up to 12 people on screen. So make sure you come and check it out. But on behalf of our guests, Chris Rondina and Ken DaCosta, my name's George Lopez. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Have a great night.
Stick around, Chris.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella bad. After her there ain't no coming back. Wanna take a run at that. I think she's feeling me, turn it up a few degrees. My imagination of her body gets the best of me. Oh gosh, she's such a tease, big lips.